Hello, I'm Samantha. Welcome to my sewing room. And today I'm going to be showing you how all these vintage patterns look like once they're sewn up. I started the year by making two versions of the 1920s one-hour dress in silk velvet. I had only planned to make one, but the colours that you find in silk velvet are just so gorgeous. And I also discovered that the 1920s one-hour dress is perfect for showing off any vintage embellishments that you might have collected. The drop waist dress, which is basically just, I was going to say a sack, but you what I mean, rectangle sewn together, is just a wonderful canvas for silk appliques, beaded trimmings, fringing, beaded belts, and I had some lovely true vintage 1920s silk appliques with the amazing arsenic green shade in, as well as a belt with green, purple and white beads, half belt from the 1920s, which was perfect. But then I also had the red and pink beaded collar that I wanted to use, and it was another genuine 1920s piece, so I had to make the red dress too. Of course, silk velvet, very slippery to sew. I love the effect of doing the shirring on the hips and on the shoulders, and it helped to give a little bit of shape to the dress so that it just caught at the hip. And they were obviously quite simple to sew apart from the slipperiness of the velvet. And I did get to wear one of the dresses, the arsenic green one. I chose to wear to Glyndebourne Opera, so it was nice to have the chance to wear it somewhere where dressing up was encouraged. And I even found the perfect car that by rights I should have arrived in, this wonderful 1920s Rolls Royce that I found in the car park. This is the make that I probably worn most of all. It's not a surprise, is it really? One wants to make all these glamorous dresses, but then you make a cosy night dress in soft brushed cotton with a late 60s, early 70s, childlike, brightly coloured floral print. And what are you drawn to wear? I mean, not out, obviously, not out. I spent a lot of my time in. See, this nightie has got a lot of wear, and it reminds me of childhood, and it's just very comforting. And I love the gathering around the neckline that you just draw onto a ribbon. It's so easy to loosen that neckline and then just draw it up as much as you want. I love the big pocket at the front, and it just was an all-round winner, this night dress. The Edwardian dress I sewed from this folkwear pattern. It's the first time that I've used a folkwear pattern, and I was really impressed. The instructions were fantastic, detailed, but not detail you don't need. You know what I mean? I find with modern patterns, which I very rarely sew from, but if I do, they tell you so much. I mean, I know I complain that vintage sewing patterns don't tell you enough, but modern ones, to me, tell you so much that my mind is glazed over with boredom. I just don't take anything in. Whereas the folkwear patterns tell you everything you need to know really clearly without extraneous waffle of the obvious. So, wonderful pattern, really worked well, and I used true Edwardian jet trimmings. I am going to have another go at this dress because I haven't really worn it, and I think it's because it's too white. So while the black trimmings do sing against the white, it turns out it's not a colour that I'm drawn to wear. So I am looking at dyes. I've thought of just tea dyeing it to a cream, so I might do that. Or the other alternatives I'm thinking of are a leaf green or a terracotta. But I think if I dye it to some kind of darker shade, I'll wear it more. And I am someone that is drawn to colour. I don't really wear black and white, black or white, which I should have thought about. Perhaps before I sew the dress. I've experimented with dyes recently and they work really well, who'd have thought. So I am going to give this dress a little refresh in a different colour, but the pattern I would definitely love to use again. I think it's very wearable and lovely pattern to sew. If you sew from it, the thing that I would recommend to follow, which I found out because I didn't, and I knew I should, just I was rushing. I feel embarrassed saying this because we all know to do this. To hang the dress for 24 hours for doing the hem, because parts of the skirt are on the bias and will stretch. Now, this really stretched, so I'm going to have to redo the hem as well. It really stretched in places. Sometimes you can get away with it, but with this pattern, definitely not. If you make it, don't be like me. Don't rush. Just hang the dress up for a good while before hemming it, but otherwise totally recommend. Wonderful pattern. Then we have the star in a circle dress, which I used this late 1940s pattern for as the basic shape of the dress, but I also used the late 40s technique of creating a circle skirt with a star radiating from the waist. We don't hear about this often now, but in the late 40s they were terribly inventive with using, say, two dresses to create one, or buying an amount of new fabric and adding it to an old dress. So in the late 40s, of course, Christian Dior introduced the new look and everyone was fed up of rationing of the war and the Gant skirts. You know, they raised hemlines. It's my least favourite part of some of the mid-40s designs. Is the skirts are very skimpy. There's not much fabric in them, which makes sense because it was fabric rationing. But after the war, it went completely the other way and these huge skirts came in. However, fabric rationing wasn't lifted in England until the late 40s. So women were in this situation where they were longing for, or not all of them, but a lot of them. Some of them were scandalised by the sheer amount of fabric used in the new dresses, but others were just longing for the luxury of loads of fabric, but they didn't have it yet. So they would create these 50s looking dresses, but from using two amounts of fabric in the same dress, either from two different dresses or one dress with their rationed amount of new fabric added to make the dress. And I actually prefer the really inventive results that you get from using contrasting fabrics in the same dress to actually when they could buy all the fabric they wanted in the 50s. So this late 40s design of the star in the circle, it had very practical origins as to why you would be creating the rays of a star in a circle, and I love the look of this dress. And I tried with the collar. I chose a late 40s pattern with a dagger collar, so my thoughts were the dagger collar would echo the triangular star shapes, and I used a Liberty wool which was midnight blue with blue stars on it, which I've had for ages, and it just completely encourages my squirrely tendencies. I had no idea what I was going to do with this wool, and of course once I decided to make a star in a circle dress and realised I had a midnight blue starry fabric, I mean, I was away. Onto this early 1940s blouse pattern, from which I made this silk daffodil print blouse, and I was thrilled with this blouse. It was so pretty. The pattern, thoroughly recommend it. False opening front, so you don't actually have to do any buttonholes. Hooray! You just sew the buttons along the top. And the one thing that I would do differently is that I would stiffen the panel where the buttons go, which I didn't. It wasn't in the pattern to do so, and it's worked out okay. But the glass buttons that I used are a little heavy for the fabric, so I would in future add some kind of light interfacing or something to the front where the buttons go. Obviously no buttonholes, so you don't have to worry about the other side. There's just one opening at the neckline so that your head can go through. And I used a piece of vintage daffodil print novelty silk, which Donna Flower pointed out to me at a vintage fair, and she was like, what about this fabric? And it was gorgeous. It had the challenge that you never know what people might have done to vintage fabrics or how much you're going to get, and someone had cut skirt pieces, or started to cut skirt pieces out of the fabric, which basically meant it had not a single selvage or straight edge left to it, which, you know, it's never helpful, but things went okay. And my other little moment of difficulty / frustration was when I found out that there was no collar piece in the pattern envelope, despite the fact that the pattern had been sold as having all its pieces. So I made a collar piece. I'm not sure it's lying completely flat. The scalloped collar piece I made, so I might have another little go at that, but it's all right, isn't it? I mean, you know, could be worse, no one would know. Now you'll know, now I've pointed it out. But I also added the frill around the cuffs because I wanted to, it's probably just in my head, I thought then they would look like daffodil flowers. Do you see what I mean? So the frill like a kind of trumpet of a daffodil. That was my thoughts. I love just the simple elasticated waist. The breeze blowing looked a little floaty, I thought, and I like the elasticated waist, just hits the top of your skirt but there's no lumpy bits to tuck in, if you know what I mean. So lovely blouse pattern, even better had it had the collar piece, and it's one that I definitely want to use again, and in fact hardly need any fabric for it. So now I'm talking, I'm remembering that I actually had 2 or 3 lots of vintage fabrics where I only had like a metre to a metre and a half, and I put them aside thinking I'll make this blouse pattern from them because it's one way you can get a whole blouse from very little fabric, so always a good thing. Patchwork skirt. So this was not a project done in a couple of weeks or a month or so. It was just sort of one of those projects, if you do have them, that sit around. You feel like they'll be with you for the rest of your life, and then one day surprisingly you finish them. It was one of those. It's made from lots of small scraps of vintage Liberty Tyler lawns, and it's a lovely idea for using up all the scraps, even scraps that maybe are too small for recent quilting, but just keep joining them. Sew them to form one big rectangle for the skirt, and then a long strip to form a ruffle for the skirt. So unlike this dress where the patchwork was sewn and then the pattern pieces were then cut out of the patchwork, for my skirt I used every bit of the patchwork, a rectangle just gathered up onto a waistband which I cut from Liberty Tyler lawn. I just wanted to show you a close-up of some of the different patches that went into the making of the skirt, and you can see that all the strips are different sizes, just depending on how much fabric was left over, and you end up with a skirt which is full of memories actually, because I think a lot of us that sew different Liberty Tyler lawns bring back memories. I wore Liberty Tyler lawn dresses as a child. My mum made them into patchwork quilts. They're just designs that have been with me all my life, and I love to just have that nostalgia in my life. That's why I have this channel, why I do vintage sewing. So a really nostalgic skirt and really wearable. This is another one, along with the night dress. I would say this is my most worn piece. I've worn it all summer. It goes with everything. Of course there's every colour in it. It's quite covering, so I don't have to worry about my legs. Well, usually they're just too pasty looking, do you know what I mean? Don't have to worry about my legs looking pasty. They never tan, no matter how much I show them the sun, even if there had been sun in the UK this year, which there wasn't. Anyway, cover pasty legs nicely, go with everything, really wearable and somehow comforty. You know, there were just some clothes, aren't there? You put them on and your life feels a bit better. That was definitely this skirt. Scotty Dog Dress. This is a dress where the fabric and the buttons just came together. I bought both, loving them both, one day, sorting through, as I love to do, organising buttons, reorganising fabrics. You know how you do. Like a squirrel examining their nuts. And I thought, oh, this is a match made in heaven. Those buttons with this fabric. And then I agonised for ages over which sewing pattern to use, and I decided on quite a simple looking, really classic 1930s shirtwaist dress, because there was something about the check, very 30s check, the 30s Scotty Dog buttons. I wanted them just shown off in a really classic 30s dress. The fact that it looks quite a simple dress unfortunately did not translate into the making of it, where because it was a 30s pattern, there's no printing on it, so it's all done through perforations. And the problem with that, when you're doing pleats, there's perforations everywhere. I mean, showing you the grain line, showing you this, showing you that, showing the pleats. So knowing which perforations, which only vary in 2 sizes, but instructions for so many different things, it's very difficult to know which perforations are telling you exactly where the pleats should go. It's basically looking at pieces of paper perforated like a colander. Anyway, I did my best. I'll never know if it's actually accurate, but it looks accurate, so I think anyone else would ever know either. So thrilled with this dress, and I decided it simply had to be filmed at Elton Palace, which is an Art Deco palace, it's called. It's not really a palace, which is over the other side of London to me, and it's been used for filming episodes of Poirot, What's the Affair at Styles, Brideshead Revisited. I determined to film there. Set off, my father was driving. He's driven in London all his life. He's like I tell him he could be a taxi driver, but it was quite a long way and very busy, and my father and the sat-nav disagreed vehemently with one another. Thought we were never going to get there. We got there eventually over much wrangling with the sat-nav, and it was about to close. Anyway, they let us in, thank goodness, but I had been crumpled up in the car for quite a number of hours by that point. So my dress does look a slightly crumply, but I had been through a lot by the time it got there, and at least I was able to film there. I was relying on my father, aka the taxi driver, to film, and he was quite tired by that point, which meant he drooped a bit, which unfortunately led to a lot of footage around missing my head, which I therefore can't include. Butterfly sleeve dress. So this was one where I felt that the dress pattern and the fabric were meant to be. So the fabric I got first, I think. It's from Donna Flower Fabrics, and it's a novelty flower and butterfly print. Late 30s, I think, early 40s maybe, rayon. And I matched it with a late 30s sewing pattern for a dress with a butterfly sleeve. And I've always loved the look of these butterfly sleeves. I did do a PDF of the sleeve pattern for anyone who also wants to create a butterfly sleeve, and that is free on my Ko-fi page. And it was surprisingly easy to sew. It's one of these things that looks like, oh, it should be complicated, but it was really easy and it just worked. It wasn't like one of those ones where you do it and you think, oh, it's gone an odd shape. No, it just works straight off. It was actually much easier than sewing the rest of the dress. So the rest of the dress has this fabric gathered over the bodice in a kind of wrap effect over to a high waistline, and then a belt at the natural waistline. It's a really pretty design, I think. I didn't have enough of the fabric, well, the length of vintage fabric, and as we know, you just get an amount, you can't necessarily get the amount you want, so it was a skimpier skirt than the pattern shows, but actually a few people said they preferred it with the less full skirt, and I think I kind of do too, actually. I think it means that the sleeves, which are star of the show, this dress, actually have more impact. So it was a happy accident not having enough fabric for that very full skirt of the pattern, I think. So I made the skirt that always fits, which I've been longing to make since I saw Shannon Makes do it. Such a clever pattern from a young independent designer, and especially when I saw that she'd done a version with a detachable pinafore, I thought, what a wonderful idea. And I used a vintage parrot fabric for it. Love parrots. It's a cotton, but I think it might have been meant for interiors, but I don't see any problem with using interiors fabrics, and I'd quite like to use more. I really like some of the designs. I recommend the pattern thoroughly. The instructions were really good, concise but thorough, had no difficulty following them, and the idea is just brilliant with the deep 18th century style pockets. And I would say the thing about these pockets, one of the reasons that I am not, which is rare these days, a huge fan of pockets in dresses a lot of the time, is I think I wouldn't want to put anything in my pockets that would spoil the line of the dress. But the thing about these 18th century pockets is the pockets are deep, so the pockets sit below your hip line, i.e. they're not creating any bulges or bulk in your silhouette, they're down in the skirt. And actually, as a dog walker, when you're always carrying bits and pieces, they're really useful. So very clever design, and does always fit. And then the pinafore you can have on or not have on. I usually have it on because I like my parrot bib, but that just buttons on to the waistband of the skirt. So what a clever idea, and I would love to make more of these. I'm actually thinking that a winter one would be lovely, maybe some kind of tartan or something. It's basically a history bounding idea where the designer wanted to combine the 18th century with the pockets and late 1940s, like 50s look with a full skirt. So perfect history bounding design, and a kind of a classic, isn't it, really? It could be worn in any era, and it's just a lovely staple piece in the wardrobe, I think. To 1940s blouses made from 1940s rayon. The thing that I especially loved about this pattern is the button-on jabot, which I thought was a lovely idea. I didn't really know how the jabot was going to look, and so I only did it on one blouse, and I actually now want to make a jabot for the second blouse. I love the effect of it, and there's something about these blouses, they're so 1940s to me. They have their little shoulder pads, they're nipped in at the waist, but just a minimal amount of fabric under the waistline where they're nipped in. So I do not understand what they do with modern clothes now. It's had lots of fabric around where you're going to tuck it in, because you just end up, don't you, with rumply fabric squashed around your tummy, which you don't want. These 40s designs that just have a little bit of fabric under the nipped in waist, perfect. I can see how these 40s blouses fitted in with a time when women were going out to work. One can see in Bletchley Park, one could imagine oneself as a code breaker. One of these blouses. I think I said secretary when I actually showed the making of these blouses, but since then I've upped the bar and thought this is the perfect blouse for code breaker, isn't it? Yes, I think so. I did my Halloween apron, so I had a whole lot of napkins just from a charity shop or thrift store, and I bought 3 different dyes, black, orange and yellow, and use them to dye a whole lot of autumnal colours. I actually recommend the use of napkins because nobody uses those damask linen napkins anymore, and the quality is beautiful. They have the lovely self designs on them that come through after dyeing, and I did a pile of napkins that I got for, I think they were £3.50, and I used, as it turned out, only a small percentage of them to create this apron. So I've got lots left to make a patchwork with, and I will also be creating another patchwork garment. A good idea, I think, for using thrifted items that are no longer really used for their original purpose. And I love the apron pattern that I use. I like the back. I think it has this wonderful swagged look to it, and it's a very covering apron. So create a Halloween theme, which I was doing. It covers the clothes you're wearing really well, and I added applique with the witchy theme, the pumpkins, the witch's boot, the owl, etc. And I used the crochet table mats. I thought it looked rather like spider's webs. Just added to some of the patches to enhance that theme. Then lastly, of course, I created from silk taffeta and velvet this claret coloured Victorian outfit, and the video I did for that is my last video, and I used it to showcase all the amazing outfits at the event, because it has to be admitted there were more amazing outfits there than mine. I hope that you have enjoyed looking through everything I've sewn in 2024. I'm pleased with the variety of Victorian and Edwardian through 20th century and independent designers of today, and I hope to also be creating a similar variety of garments next year, and very much hope that you'll join me. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you next time. I'm planning on putting out a video every other week on Saturdays, so watch out for those. Next time we'll be looking at vintage pyjamas. Till then.